My name is Jordan Redfield Wade. By day, I'm a philanthropist and private investigator, but by night, I protect the people of New Ark City in a different way.
My name, champ, is RedWing.
As she lay dying, I promised my mother that I would fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and I refused to let her down. I am the defender of New Ark City. I am RedWing. My eyes took forever to open, and I had a pounding headache. I don't normally get hangovers, so this was at once confusing and mildly disappointing. I was so out of it that it took me a few moments to realize where I was, how I'd gotten there, and why I was stark naked but my back felt warm. I'm in Dean's apartment. In Dean's bed. This is Dean's arm around me. God damn, he's comfortable. I untangled myself from Dean's arms and stood up. I reached my hands up and stretched. I felt sore in strange places, but as the night before came back to me, I began to smile. Reconciliatory sex is some of the best sex ever. I mean, Dean and I were already pretty great at that, but the added urgency and heat was very titillating. Never a disappointment. I pulled on my boxer briefs and realized with a start that Joe had my street clothes. I walked over to Dean's closet, sneaking so as to not mistakenly wake up the gorgeous, sleepy man in the bed. I put on one of his tight-fitting tank tops and grabbed a pair of his sweatpants, but then decided to leave them off. I'd imagined I looked a wee bit sexy in the I just had mind-blowing sex kind of way. I thought I looked like I had just come from a boudoir photo shoot. I grabbed my phone from the pocket of my pants holster and walked out into the kitchen. I leaned my arm on the counter above the sink. I had one voicemail, 3 text messages, and 2 other notifications. The voicemail would be from Joe. The 3 text messages, however, were from 3 different people. One was Joe asking if I was alright, and telling me that something weird happened, and that she needed me to come home, soon. Vague, but I guess that was alright. Another message was calling for an emergency meeting of the founding family council, sent by the ever-blonde, ever-bitchy Faith Flaherty. Why, oh why, was she in charge of organizing these FFC things? The last was a text from Scarlett, asking if Joe and I could visit her house for a chat that afternoon. I replied to Faith saying I'd be there shortly. I texted Joe and told her I was fine. I told Scarlett that she could come to my house around midday. There, no meltdowns. At that moment I felt Dean's strong arms wrap around my torso while he kissed the back of my neck. Well, good morning to you too, then.
Last night was incredible, Jay.
He planted another kiss on the back of my neck.
Simply magical. I really missed us. Wait, was that actually magically enhanced?
I laughed and turned around to kiss him on the lips. No, that was all us. All us. We kissed for a few more moments, but I stopped myself. I remembered the reason we had met up the night before. Listen, Dean, last night was phenomenal, and we will need to repeat that, hopefully tonight, but I do still need some time. I love you, but we have been broken up for almost a full year, and I still have to find out what happened to that mafia guy. I want to be with you, but I think, given all the new information that you have and that I have, that we should take it a little bit slow, like pressing reset on your favorite game. He nodded, but he looked a little dejected.
That's fair. Do I at least get you for breakfast?
Sadly, no. I grabbed a pair of his pants out of his room and a t-shirt. The lab explosion is going to have some consequences. Joe's office just blew up, we don't know who that scientist was, and the crazy blue light... we don't know what that was either. I've got some sleuthing to do today. I dealt with my hair and corrected my overall appearance. I kissed Dean for another minute or so. With my hand on the door, I remembered to say one more thing. Also, don't mention this to Jared. I want to break the news to him after I figure out who all these people are. I'll call you tonight, babe, okay?
You got it, Jay. Love you.
I paused, unsure of myself for a moment. But then I replied, love you too. As I found out later, almost immediately after I left Dean, he made a discovery. And armed with that discovery, he went in search of Alejandro, to make him pay for the year of hell that we'd been through. Roughly an hour later, after sneaking into my own home, showering the sex off of my body, and eating a hefty amount of Honey Nut Cheerios in my room, I felt prepared to face Johanna. Jo was looking a little bit squirrely and a little bit fidgety. I was a bit disconcerted, so I approached and put a hand on her forehead. Jo, are you okay, love?
Yes? I mean, no, but yes.
She didn't look at me. She stared at the refrigerator, looking frightened and exasperated. Are you high? She looked at me with disgust and scoffed.
No, you know better.
She's right. I did totally know that she wouldn't dare. I cocked my head to the side, wordlessly asking her what the issue was if it wasn't for drugs.
It's just, well, since I've got up, and don't freak out, but the fridge has been yelling at me about how empty it is.
She paused and turned to face the fridge. She scowled and yelled back at it.
Fine, we'll change your bloody filter. Maybe you'll finally start freezing ice for a change. What do you mean you don't know what ice is? You've got a freezer as a literal part of you.
I raised my eyebrows. It had finally happened. Jo had finally completely gone utterly insane. I thought about calling Jared to let him know that his only daughter had gone crazy and would have to be taken to the crazy ward, but I decided to listen to her first.
Okay, so this morning I was woken up by the alarm on my phone. But what it actually sounded like was Siri deciding to throw shade at me for never waking up on the first tone. I was really confused. Then, when I got to the kitchen, the oven was complaining about how cold he was, and the refrigerator was also angry.
Jo stood up and went to her computer in the next room. I followed in time to see that, without her even touching it, the computer turned on. She blinked, and the computer replied, and started to do a search for the search term she was thinking about in her mind. She was thinking about what this could possibly be. Jo worried her lower lip and looked confused.
I guess the long and short of it is, you're not the only one in this apartment with powers anymore.
I couldn't make any sense of it. How is this possible? We'd sequenced her DNA several times, hunting for genetic markers that existed in my own DNA, and found nothing unusual. We tested her blood regularly, both to check on her sugar levels and to do DNA analysis in general. What changed between yesterday and today? And then it hit me. That blue light. Have you figured out what kind of shockwave that was?
That's what I called you for. I think the blue wave was an activation signal of some type. I don't know who'd affected other than myself. I started a quick analysis of my blood last night and compared it to the samples I keep on file. All previous blood scans, for lack of a better word for it, were clean. Today, there's something new. I don't know what it activated in me, but I'm guessing that whatever it was altered something in my genetic makeup.
She stood up and walked to stand away from the computer, facing me. The image on the screen flickered off to the screensaver. The image on the screen flickered to reveal the search results for the word Technopath.
To the best of my understanding, I can manipulate electrical currents and communicate with technology. It appears I can manipulate the tech as well, just using my brain. This is gonna make hacking super easy now!
I rolled my eyes. Of course Jo would become the world's only person to be able to manipulate machines with her brain. She will literally never shut up about this now. Great. But then I realized another thing. If this happened to Johanna, Jo might not be the only one. How do we know it didn't happen to anyone else? Johanna, for all intents and purposes, had just the morning before been completely normal. Today, she was like a superhuman computer. Would there be other people like her that had been nearby the explosion? How far did the shockwave reach? And what specifically happened? I hazarded my question to Johanna. Jo, what if you're not the only person this affected? We don't know what this is, but if it's in other people, we may have to figure out a way to neutralize it.
I'm gonna run as many different kinds of blood tests as I can. I gotta find the reason. I'll set up a call alert, and I'll just keep you in the loop if anyone shows their abilities.
Oh, good. She was always one step ahead of me. What would I do without her? Hey, Jo?
Yeah?
You should have a codename now, you know?
I thought of that. You know, we've been over that already, and it makes so much more sense now. White Hawk. See, it works, because hawks see everything, and have always looked good in white. Plus, birds of a feather, right?
I had to admit, that sounded good. RedWing and White Hawk, defenders of New Ark City. That name slays. At that moment, our buzzer rang. By the way, Scarlet is coming. She said something happened, magically speaking, and she needs to address both of us about it. And that's probably her downstairs right now.
What?
Jo shouted in a loud whisper, causing the TV to turn on and then promptly shatter, along with causing the toaster to ding up with no toast. Whoa.
You invited her here with me? Like this?
Well, go get fancy. I'll stall for you. She shot me a glare, but I knew she appreciated it. She ran into her room and closed her door, while I buzzed Scarlet in and instructed her how to get to our door. Scarlet entered the apartment and removed her black, lightweight formal jacket. She was looking as serene as she always did, casting a majestic purple-shadowed, emerald-eyed gaze over everything, with a mischievous smile dancing across her red lips. Her rich copper-red hair was pulled back into a large frizzy bun. She wore an elegant floor-length empire dress, the color of sleek onyx. She appraised the apartment, though it was hard to tell if she viewed it favorably or not. I felt a little self-conscious about the uncleared table and chairs. Welcome, Scarlet.
Thank you for allowing my entrance.
She lightly put a hand on the dining room table and looked me in the eyes.
I apologize for it being so last minute, but it was urgent that I speak with you. May I sit?
I nodded and signaled to my mostly clear couch. We took our seats. I offered her a cup of tea, and she pulled out a fancy teacup from her purse. Wow, that was the single most British thing I've ever seen anyone do. I filled her teacup with water, and I used my force field to alter the temperature of the water in the teacup. I brought it to a boil, and offered her a tea bag. She took it and began to steep her tea.
My word, that power is useful, isn't it? I'm quite jealous.
Scarlet giggled, and it sounded like tinkling bells.
What seems to be the trouble?
Johanna was behind me. She was wearing a white short-sleeve button-up with a light gray vest that I seem to recall Jo purchasing because it propped up her breasts just perfectly. Johanna had managed in that short amount of time to apply her winged liner just perfectly, and I could smell the warm vanilla notes of her perfume from where I sat. She'd put on her best pair of white skinny jeans. She was trying to make a good first impression, and was pulling out quite a few stops. Scarlet stood and extended her hand for Jo to shake.
Ah, Miss Johanna Lovelace. So pleased to make your acquaintance.
Jo gently kissed the back of her hand.
The pleasure is all mine, Scarlet Crescent.
There was a moment of tension, where I looked at the two women and raised my eyebrows. I looked away and puffed out my cheeks. I debated whether or not I should leave and give these two the apartment. I waited for a few seconds more, and then I cleared my throat. Ladies, if you don't mind.
Oh, my apologies. Yes, there was a disturbance in the magical order last night. I sensed and felt a great disruption around the time of the fire. I was considering that it may have been the fire itself, in the way that many fires cause a disturbance when they consume, but this felt different. It must have had something to do with the shockwave, correct?
Hell if I know.
Well, I don't expect you to necessarily know. I merely wanted to know if you determined the source of the disturbance. You were both on the scene, yes?
I paused for a second. Did I say that out loud? I somehow managed to miss how she had responded to something I didn't say out loud. I'm not sure what the deal with the shockwave is, but it caused Jo to develop powers. I was at the center of the blast and I didn't feel any changes, though. Did you experience any changes, Scarlet?
Why, yes, I did.
She crossed her legs and rested her elbow on her knee, leaning forward a little bit. Beside me, I could practically feel Jo's blood start racing.
You see, I've always been... Well, I know a fair bit about magic. I'm also quite good at reading people, understanding emotions, empathic intuition, all that. And as you know, divination is my specialty. But today, when I awoke, I was hearing loud voices. They didn't appear to be talking to anyone in particular, but they sounded clear as day, as if someone was saying them. It turns out I had 2 clients waiting downstairs. I hid in the shadows for a moment and watched them. The voices continued chattering to themselves, but I saw their lips weren't moving. I was able to hear their thoughts.
So, you're a telepath?
It would appear as such.
So it's true then. The blast caused people to develop powers. But then, how many people were affected? Are there a bunch of people out there like me now? Dear God, that would be a total nightmare.
I'm certain there are a few.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh, this is bad. Oh, this is very bad. Oh, good Lord. Okay, well, we're gonna need answers. I let out a sigh and ran my fingers through my hair. Phew, okay. I've got a founding family meeting soon, but perhaps you two can both work together on figuring out what this is and how we can reverse it. Jo looked hurt and shook her head.
I don't want this reversed. I love this power already.
Okay, we'll reverse everyone's power except yours, Jo, but we'll need you to figure out where it came from, what gene mutated, and how we unmutated gene. I had definitely never used that word before. Note to self, figure out if unmutate is even a word. Jo, also please check in with Kieran. He's out of a job today too. You can get set up at the detective agency for now. Jo's face soured, as if she forgot that the building of her primary employer had just the night before blown up, but she nodded in agreement. My phone buzzed as I left the apartment. It was Dean. The text was strange.
I love you, Jordan. I will take care of this. I will always take care of you.
Well, finally, we have the council all assembled.
I was in my seat exactly 35 seconds after the impromptu meeting was set. Everyone was just beginning to be seated. The heads of each family varied in age, but I'm the youngest council member by far. The irritating woman who had tried to throw shade at me was Faith Flaherty. Her straw-colored hair was pulled back into a bun, held in place by 2 ornate purple chopsticks. Her icy blue eyes were, well, cold as they always were. You would think with how much she rolls those damn eyes that they'd get a little bit warmer simply from the friction. I was not having it that day. Perhaps giving more than 2 hours' notice would be helpful. Or did my invite get lost in the invisible phone again? A little early for wine, isn't it? She stiffened a little, holding a bottle of white wine that was always present at these meetings, that she usually finished by herself. So what is so pressing that we needed to call the founding family council to have this meeting?
Perhaps you didn't notice, Jordan, but it's your company's laboratory that's burned to the ground. Again. So really, it's your fault that the meeting had to be called.
I'm well aware of that, Faith. And as the lab was one of many subsidiaries of Redfield Wade Collective, it is a matter I will be handling personally. I will be meeting with the mayor shortly to discuss the circumstances under which last night's debacle occurred. The council can rest assured that, when it is rebuilt, it will be built at no cost to the city, thus making it not an issue to discuss for the council. So I reiterate my previous question. Why have you called us all here? She bristled and paused. The rest of the council began to whisper. Faith cleared her throat and affixed a plastic smile to her face.
Well, that's just wonderful that you found an acceptable solution to the issue of rebuilding, but that's not the only reason why we came together.
Oh, really? Come out with it then, Faith. Some of us have jobs to do. Okay, I admit it. Sometimes I'm a child, and also petty. She glared and poured a small bit of wine before explaining.
There was a spotting last night, which is why I invited the police chief in for this.
A pit in my stomach, in the same place where you normally feel pain, pulsed red. The pain feeling was replaced with a slowly simmering anger. Calling public officials was a thing that she was allowed to do, sure, but that was not the point. Captain Lovelace, being my adopted father, should have been called by me. She overstepped her bounds, but all I could do was grit my teeth. When the door opened, Captain Jared Lovelace acknowledged the rest of the room, but sat next to me, giving me a half smile. I returned the smile. I always believe that your parents from birth are important, but the people who raise you have a special place in your life. The people who take you in when they absolutely don't have to, they are the true heroes. The title of father never seemed to appropriately encompass all I felt and all I owed to this man. But I guess at the moment it's what would have to do. He nodded to me before addressing the rest of the council.
Captain Lovelace, present and at the service of the council.
Yes, thank you, Captain. Can you please update us on the sighting from last night?
As you wish, young lady.
My adopted father had raised me well enough to know how to be properly petty. Most gay men learn the subtle art of shade from watching RuPaul's Drag Race, but I learned it from Jared, the errant father of the most brassy lady I'd ever known. He used to tell us when we were younger, when someone thinks they are better than you, they leave a lot of themselves exposed for ridicule. No one is perfect, and everyone has insecurities. If you want to knock them down a peg, make them aware that you know what their weaknesses are. In this case, he knew Faith hated how much her being young made her feel less qualified to make demands of the council. And for a control freak, that in particular can burn. It made me smirk. Jared continued, and my blood ran cold.
Over the past few weeks, we've been receiving reports of a vigilante in our city. This person has donned a mask and taken patrolling the shadows of the city. Several of the mafia underlings have told us he operates under the name RedWing. Just 2 nights ago, we received a 911 call about a 211 Henry in progress on the alley on 2nd and Washington. Shots had been fired, and we were expecting a fatality. When we arrived, the criminal was restrained, and the couple, who wound up being the mayor's niece and a fiancé, was safe and unharmed. Though the male claimed to have been shot in the chest and had enough blood on his shirt to suggest he had been shot, as well as a bullet hole, but no bullet or wound. You all understand, of course, that vigilantism is illegal, and my office is investigating this individual. We have no leads currently, but we have one single still image taken from a rooftop security camera. We do not have a clear face, but we at least have identified the weapon he is using to subdue the criminals. It is suspected to be dark steel, which, as we know, is a synthetic metal manufactured in Blackburn Labs. We are currently investigating the lab employees to see if anyone fits the profile who would have had access.
I realized I'd been sitting up tensely, and then I breathed a sigh of relief, which caused Jared to look at me strangely. I coughed and relaxed a slight bit. And what was the sighting last night? What does it have to do with the explosion, Captain? I didn't dare say Dad in front of the rest of the council.
It's funny you would ask, Jordan. My partner and second-in-command, Detective Dean Morgan, was first on the scene. He was with you just before that. I hate to ask you about your personal dealings before the rest of the council, but when it comes to my crew, I can't leave any lead unturned. Do you know if he's all right?
My sources tell me he returned to his apartment yesterday and that Jordan here...
She paused to look at me with a bitchy smirk on her face.
...was seen leaving his apartment this morning. Isn't that right?
This bold bitch here. Time to bring out the low guns. Who is your source? TMZ? Gossip Girl? Kit Corner? Well, Faith, not that my personal and private life is ever any of your business, but yes, I was with him last evening. We are still friends after all, and it certainly beats being home alone, entirely alone. Speaking of being alone in the evenings, how is Dale? Certainly that was a low blow and problematic, bringing up her ex-husband that ruined her mayoral campaign by being caught in a public restroom with another man's junk in his hands. But she literally just tried to shame me for being gay and sexually active as a full-grown adult. So it stands to reason that I am allowed to remind her of her own personal life. And I was right. It shut her up about me and my love life after that. She looked mortified. So I turned back to Jared. Captain, are there any suspects?
None at this time.
Jared narrowed his eyes at me, like he knew I was keeping a secret. If I may, when Dean comes back into the office, I would ask him to be in charge of the hunt. He said he had information, and may have a lead on who it could be. He said this morning that, last night, he came face-to-face with RedWing.
Was an officer discussing an ongoing police investigation with you as a civilian?
At that time, it was me as a detective, not me as a private citizen. Speaking of, you know my agency will help wherever we can.
Well, that's lovely. Speaking of assistance, we need to discuss how we will address the employees of the lab. Most of those men and women have lost their jobs and will be struggling. We should do something for those unfortunate souls.
Her fake sincerity was maddening, but she did have a point. You know what, Faith? For once, I agree with you. The RWC will already be providing them with paid leave until the new building can be rebuilt. However, should we decide to hold a victim relief fundraiser, I do have the Redfield Wade Estate to offer as a venue. And the culinary program at the high school will be more than happy to offer the food and hors d'oeuvres. Do you have any other suggestions for a free-of-charge venue and free-of-charge food? I knew she wouldn't object. I turned to face the other council members. All right, all those in favor of hosting a benefit a week from now at Redfield Wade Estate in honor of the workers of Blackburn Labs, please raise your hand. Everyone but Faith raised their hands almost immediately. As I knew they would. Well, that settles that. And with that business complete, this meeting is adjourned.
Hey!
Faith looked furious. We all turned to stare at her as if to say, you really want to try all of us?
Ugh, fine. The meeting is adjourned.
She rolled her eyes. I stood up, nodded to the council and Jared. I left through the front door and was about to hail a cab when Jared came up to me. He pointed off to the side where his cruiser was parked. I nodded and he led me to the car. As soon as I sat down in the car seat, Jared began asking questions.
Alright, so out with it. What happened last night? What happened to Dean? You have information and I need to hear it. I didn't tell the council, but another witness said that they saw a light in your agency shortly before the explosion.
I gulped, and he definitely heard it. And then he continued.
Kid, did you have anything to do with the explosion?
No. Of course not, no. Why would I blow up my own building? Dean had brought me out to give me information on a case we've been working on together.
Since when do you and Dean partner up? I thought that was done when he cheated.
It was, but I have a reason to believe there was more to the story than just that now. He rolled his eyes the same way Joe does, like father, like daughter.
Whatever it was, clearly it was a significant tip, since you wound up back at his place, or is that where he gave you the tip? Please tell me you at least used protection.
I laughed a little bit and scrunched up my nose. Oh my god. Oh my god. I mean, of course I did, but gross. Come on, Dad. Jared paused, realizing that I'd called him Dad. Even though I'd been doing that on and off for years, it still caught him off guard, but he smiled as he always did.
Jordan, you know you're the son I never got to have. You know that you can come to me with anything. I mean that truly. Anything.
I nodded and we drove along in silence for a few minutes. I felt terrible keeping this secret. He may be my adoptive dad, but he was still the chief of police. If he knew what I was doing, he'd have no choice but to arrest me. And I can't let that happen. One day, though, I will tell him. I finally spoke up. Look, I know it's your job, and I know you have to do it, but please, don't hunt for RedWing. He saved Kieran and Dean's life last night, and he's only been doing good for the city. And technically, he's only been performing citizens' arrests.
Kid, I know. There isn't much I can do. There's no real loophole. If I see him, I will have to bring him to justice.
I frowned, but Jared continued.
So have Dean tell RedWing to make sure we don't catch him slipping up. I won't look too hard for him so long as he stays on the straight and narrow. Tell Dean to pass that message along.
I smiled at this. We continued on, chattering about Joe and some department drama, but all the while I was thinking about what he said. It was obvious I couldn't tell him what I was doing. I couldn't tell him that I was the winged vigilante. I had always thought there was a loophole. I mean, I still have my detective badge, meaning I'm legally allowed to work these cases. I'm legally allowed to use a gun, but I find it much harder to kill someone with my darts, so I prefer to use those. I never strike first, so every action I take is in self-defense. There are no major injuries and no killing. I always provide evidence for the police of wrongdoing on the part of the offender. It is better to apprehend a bad guy and let him be prosecuted than to have RedWing become judge, jury, and executioner. In that respect, I'm no different than I was as a cop. I'm just not a cop anymore. I'd argue that being a detective is almost like being a cop, and because I always call for backup, I'm not committing a serious crime. Right? God, being a vigilante is so complicated. Jared dropped me off a block away from the City Hall offices. I waved goodbye as he pulled away, and then I walked into the building. When I got inside, I straightened my tie before waving to the mayor's receptionist, Tim Cortez. He was a Latinx gentleman that I had went to high school with. Puerto Rican, if I recall correctly. He was about 5'10", slender, and dressed a little bit like a librarian. All in all, he was attractive in rather a nerdy way. We'd never really talked all that much, but I always got the hint that he might have a crush on me, or that he might have had a crush on me way back in the day. I've caught him looking at me a few times. One of these days, I guess I'm gonna have to talk to him. In fact, why not let that be today? I put on a charming smile and approached Tim. Hey, Tim. How are you?
Oh, Jord, I mean, Mr. Redfield Wade. Hi.
You had it right the first time. Call me Jordan. He was blushing, and it made him look even more adorable. I gave him a little wink, and I thought he might melt. I leaned against his desk. Hey, can I see your cell phone for a second? He looked confused, but handed it to me. I entered my cell phone number, saved it, and even took a picture of my face for the contact photo. I also sent myself a text from his phone so I'd have his number as well. I handed him back his phone, and he looked like he was going to faint. You should use that number sometime. How about Saturday?
Okay, sure.
He smiled, and I smirked.
Oh, right, you have an appointment. The mayor will see you now.
And I'll see you later, won't I? I walked to the mayor's office door, sending one last flirty look behind me. Tim's face looked about as red as RedWing's emblem. I winked and opened the door. When I opened the door, the mayor's chair was facing a large window, facing away from me. He was speaking on the phone and hadn't heard the door open. I heard a small snippet of his conversation.
Just you wait, Cassie, my love. It will be Saturday. I promise. Just give the boys time.
I cleared my throat, and the chair turned around. He saw me and smiled.
Darling, I'll have to call you back. My meeting is here.
The mayor hung up his phone and extended his hand to me.
Good to see you as always, Mr. Wade.
Of course. And please, Mr. Mayor, call me Jordan. I honestly hate it when people shorten my last name. It's a hyphenated name, but that doesn't mean that both parts of it aren't important. It's Mr. Redfield Wade, and that is the end of that story.
Only if you call me Edward. Please, sit down. Make yourself comfortable.
I sat across from him at his desk. The chair he had me sitting in was quite comfortable, but not as comfortable as the plush office chair that he was sitting in. I had met the mayor many times before at various functions. Sitting in his office, he looked like an off-duty private investigator from any 1950s Chicago noir. His brown hair was cut short, and the little that remained on top was gelled to the left, with a little bit of gray streaked throughout. He was in pretty great shape for his age, which I presumed to be his mid-50s. He wore a white casual button-down, with black pants and black suspenders. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing a black leather cuff with some intricate markings on the right arm, and the beginnings of a large tattoo. His eyes were something else, though. They were brown and piercing. Looking into them made me feel as though he was probably hiding something. I had voted for this man, if I recalled. I had voted for this man based on his policies. But when I think about those eyes, they make me feel a little bit uneasy. The mayor sat down in his chair, leaned forward, and put his elbows on his desk. He steepled his hands before his chin and pursed his lips slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched before he spoke.
So tell me what happened. What caused the explosion? Do you know which employee is behind it?
Honestly, sir, we don't know what caused it. It's hard to know what it is when we have almost no security footage. My PI agency is across the street, and we didn't pick up anything on our cameras either. The server is being examined by my technicians later today. No one was actually injured, and only our property was damaged. Our security is too good during the day to have just let someone enter if they were going to plant a bomb or something. My guess is that someone left chemicals exposed to each other, and a reaction somehow formed an explosion.
So, just an accident. Imagine that.
I shifted in my seat, suddenly extremely uncomfortable. He paused and looked at his clock for a second. I thought I detected a look of disappointment on his face, but when he turned back to face me, he wore a smirk across his lips.
Well, as long as everyone's fine. You'll be rebuilding, I'd imagine.
Of course.
Good. Good. Now, what do you make of this character that's been seen on the rooftops of the city?
Sir? I knew what he was talking about, certainly, but I wanted to stall to see what I could find.
What do they call him? Redbird? RedWing? Batbird? Redbat?
I had to stop myself from laughing at that list of names. Oh, you mean RedWing?
Yes! That's his name. What do you make of him?
He smiled, but his eyes and brows seemed to narrow like he was angry at something. Well, so far, I think he's done some good for the city. I mean, there's no telling what he'll do next, which makes him a bit of a wild card, but I get the impression that he is fighting on behalf of those who cannot fight for themselves. And I admire that personally, as I'm sure you do. He made a face for a millisecond that seemed almost annoyed, but he smiled.
Well, that would be where you were wrong. This person who goes about hiding his face, injuring citizens of the city who, even if they have made a poor choice in life, don't deserve to have their freedom encroached on by a common street thug in a Halloween costume.
It was my turn to bristle slightly, but unlike the mayor, my face didn't change. He stood and looked out his window.
There is a saying, Mr. Wade, if you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, he will never go hungry. Well, vigilantes like this RedWing character are just handing out fish. He is creating a complacent population of people who just want to be taken care of. Freeloaders. When I was a young boy, when my brother was still around, he was that type. He would always stand up for those people, including me. Wound up happening is those people began not to be able to fight their own battles. Each and every one of them had potential for individual success and greatness, but instead of achieving it, they grew lazy. I was one of those kids. I knew he'd always have my back, so I started doing more and more reckless things. I would walk at night outside alone, expecting him to be watching out for me. I'd walk around bad-mouthing bigger boys on the playground, knowing they wouldn't mess with me or they'd have to deal with my brother. But one day, one of those kids didn't know my brother, and he beat me relentlessly, and I couldn't defend myself from him. I went home that day broken and bloodied, but I didn't tell my brother a thing. From that day forward, I fought my own battles. I didn't wait for someone else to fight my battles for me. If I waited for that, do you think I'd have wound up here? This city may be the city of progress, but it has bad habits that need to be cleansed before we can move forward truly. And that, Mr. Wade, is what I aim to do.
He looked me dead in the eyes as he said the last sentence. I shuddered, bit the inside of my lip, and let a tense moment of silence hang between us. I think you are dramatically underestimating what the people of this city are capable of. I have to say, your comments are rather troubling. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, pretending it went off. Oh, and would you look at that? I just got a text coming in from the agency. I have a customer waiting. I stood and extended my hand to shake. Always a pleasure to see you, Mr. Mayor.
Likewise. Keep up the good work, Mr. Wade. I will see you very soon.
He sat back in his chair and turned to face it towards the window as I left. I said a quick little goodbye to Tim and left the building. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. When I got to my agency around 2:45 in the afternoon, the air still smelled like smoke and rubble. The street was blocked off. The fire trucks had gone, and all that was left was smoking ash and melted computers. When I entered the agency, the air felt a little strange. I heard a floorboard creak near me. I froze, readying myself to strike. The floorboard creaked behind me again. I ducked and swung my right leg underneath my assailant, knocking them to the ground and pinning them there with my arm. It took me a moment to recognize the face. Kieran?
What the fuck, man? Would you mind getting off me, mate?
Oh, right. Sorry. I eased up, and Kieran sat up. What are you doing in the agency?
Well, it's not like I have a job to go to, do I?
I forgot about his job as a medical research assistant at Blackburn Labs, and how that job was obviously no more.
Anyway, Joe said to come here.
I stood and walked to my desk. I sat in my chair. Kieran sat in the client's chair facing me. He was wearing his black leather jacket with green stripes on the sleeve and green zipper teeth. He wore black biker pants and a t-shirt underneath that. This is the most casual I'd seen him dress in years. It was almost alarming. I ruffled my hair and sighed, leaning back. Are you okay, Key? Like, really? I looked at him concerned. Here was the guy who had lost everything, and had lost everything more than once. Behind his glasses, deep inside his hazel eyes, you can see it all. The first lab fire that killed his mother. The mental illness that took his father. The drug abuse that took his brother. The depression that took his sister. The explosion that nearly had taken him. And yet here he is, still standing. Or at least in this case, here he sits, quite regally with his head held high. He has darker skin than my own, but only barely. His hair was cut into a Caesar cut with a fade, a conservative haircut that he kept since the year he had trained as a combat medic before getting his master's degree. Like the Lacroix surname suggested, it was clear that his family was Haitian and French. He looked like he could be my slightly darker, nerdier younger brother.
Weirdly, yeah, I am. Sure, my life work is gone, but I'm here. After everything, I'm still here. As long as I'm standing, I can rebuild.
You're goddamn right, Key. You are goddamn right.
Besides, my therapist was telling me it was time for a change. I want a different job, you know? Something that is more direct in working with people. Somewhere I can see the good I do.
Hey, can I get you something to drink or anything? He smirked.
Got anything strong and sweet?
A sweet honey on the rock?
Ah, you remember my favorite. Of course, just a small one, though.
I nodded and pulled out the sweet tea, the ice, and the honey bourbon from my office mini-fridge. I always had the cabinets stocked, in case someone stopped over for lunch or a client got particularly saucy. I poured half a glass for both of us. We chatted for a long time, before being joined by Joe and Scarlett. Around 5 p.m., while updating Joe about my flirtation with Tim, my phone rang. The caller ID said it was Dean, so I answered. Dean, should you be calling me while you're at work?
Surprise, bitch. This ain't Dean, Jordan. It's me.
My blood ran cold at the word me. I never heard a voice hold more venom in a single word. It was almost like it gripped my throat through the phone. I realized that there is only one person this could possibly be. The only person who could hate me this much and also be connected to Dean. Alejandro. Where is he?
Oh, good. You're not as dense as you look.
This bold bitch here. Oh, I'm preparing to read him. I seethed. I signaled to Joe, who nodded and tapped her ear. Her eyes glowed white. I knew she was listening in and tracing the call. Kieran looked at her in fascination, but stayed quiet.
He's very clever, you know, Dean is. He figured out who I was yesterday, and today he decided to run all the way here to make me apologize for what I did to him. But I didn't do anything. Nothing he didn't want to have happen. And now he's standing here with one gun pointed at his head and the other at his heart, just waiting for my command to take himself out. And he will do it too. People always tend to do what I say.
My heart froze, beating slower than ever. So this was serious. I had to think carefully about this. I don't know about this Alejandro guy. I don't know why he is the way he is. But there are a few things I could infer about him, enough to exert some control over the situation. I'd have to be careful since Dean's life hung in the balance. Beads of sweat formed on Joe's forehead. She tapped Scarlett on the shoulder and held out her cell phone, which had a transcript of the call, with the last thing Alejandro Parcelli had said. Scarlett gasped and bit her lip before standing up. She went over to the bookshelves. She rifled through the magical theory books on the shelves and pulled out a book called Donum Maleficus, The Gift of the Witches. Satisfied they were on it, I made a verbal move. Pathetic.
What did you say?
Oh, sweetheart, I called you pathetic.
Is that a wise thing to say to the man who can take your lover's life with a single word?
Please, bitch. You called me at 5 p.m. on a Thursday. You waited until you had something of mine that just fell into your lap before acting. You didn't even have the balls to interact with me off your own turf. You need me to come to you. Otherwise, you'd have come after me sooner. You are weak, and you need this advantage because you know you couldn't win against me anywhere on equal terms. You won't kill him, not now, because if you did, what reason would I have to come to you? I don't know why you are so hell-bent on hurting me. I don't know what I did to you, bitch, but let's handle this like men, face to face. That is, if you think you can take me. The line was quiet. Jo signaled by holding her hands up and pointing to a map on her computer screen. Alejandro finally spoke.
He's not the only thing I have of yours. Check your texts. You have exactly 30 minutes to get to where I am. Oh, and Jordan. Let's dance.
He hung up and I looked at my text. I saw a text from Tim and I blanched. I opened a text and it was a picture message of Tim Cortez, blindfolded, gagged and tied to a chair, just on the left of Dean, who had his gun pointed at his own right temple. The message was clear. If Dean shot, he'd kill them both. I showed Johanna the message, and her face set into a blank, angered stare. She had already put her headset on.
He's 15 minutes away by rooftop. He's in an abandoned warehouse near the harbor. I've managed to shut off security cameras between here and there, like a boss. They are going down much easier than before. Fuck, this power is great.
Rooftop? Powers? Jordan? What the fuck is going on?
Look, Kieran, since you're in the agency now, you are sworn to secrecy. I've got something to show you. I pulled out a drawer from my desk and pulled out the suit. I took off my suit and pants, which caused Jo and Scarlett to look away, but Kieran continued to watch. I zipped up the bodysuit and turned around. The emblem on my chest glowed like a ruby. I put on the domino mask and applied the leg holster, checking to make sure all of the different darts were there. I pulled on some bracers. I turned to Kieran, who raised an eyebrow.
You're the vigilante? The one they've been talking about on the street? The one who saved me yesterday?
Yep. I'm RedWing.
Isn't that a little on the nose in terms of name?
He smirked. I knew he was in. Branding, right? It's just good marketing. With that, I walked toward the back door. But before I could reach it, I paused and looked back at Jo, realizing we were about to run into this blind. Search as much as you can about the Parcelli line, but pay particular attention to Alejandro's ancestry and history. There's something I'm missing about him, and I think that thing will explain why he hates me specifically.
You got it, boss.
Joe's eyes began to glow a bluish white, like a computer screen left on a blank document. Her hands raised up, and the computer screen was suddenly projected like a hologram. Joe was shocked at the new extent of her powers, and Kieran dropped a glass on his foot.
Whoa, this is dope as fuck!
Jordan, darling.
Scarlett didn't look up from the book that she was perusing.
Please be careful. I'm getting a feeling. I'm sure you know you're walking into a trap, but I'm not sure what kind yet. I'll let you know, of course, as soon as I figure it out.
I nodded to her, and then to Kieran I said, Kieran, look, I know this is a bit hard to take in, and I don't want to ask too much of you, but can you follow behind me? We might need medical assistance, and I know you've got a combat medical kit in your bag.
Anything you need, Jay. Good thing I brought the bike.
Hey, Key, take this.
Joe tossed Kieran the headset.
I won't be needing this anymore. This power is excellent. Just plug it into your phone and I'll be able to communicate with you and Jordan.
Kieran nodded and followed me out into the alley, where he had parked his motorcycle that I'd gotten for him when he completed his master's degree. He put on the helmet and then checked the directions.
I'll be there about 3 minutes after you.
Shortly after that moment, I was soaring through the air from rooftop to rooftop. I didn't care if I was seen by civilians from their window. Just another story for them to tell. I activated the comm device and communicated to the office.
Whitehawk, as soon as I have a visual on Dean, put in a call to your dad directly. He asked to talk to RedWing specifically today.
Roger that. Are you ready for the details on the family of this fuckwad?
What did you find?
Okay, so you know that there were 3 primary crime families in New Ark City? The Parcelli family are on top and have the most political influence. The McNamara clan controls import and exports at the piers, and the Santiago gang, which has reportedly fallen under command of the Parcellis. Roughly 30 years ago, 3 years before we were born, a pretty intense turf war erupted between the 3 mobs. The McNamaras, as New Arklow was still considered an Irish-American city at the time, were winning, and the Santiagos joined forces with the Parcellis, which went well, and they took control of New Arklow and campaigned to have it renamed New Ark City, losing the tie to Ireland. Peace was fostered between the Santiagos and the Parcellis, which lasted about 2 years, and then disaster struck. Don Santiago ordered a failed hit on the 25-year-old Antonio Parcelli. Apparently, he'd caught Antonio with his daughter Isabella. The previous Don Parcelli retaliated, and strangely enough, the 2 Dons agreed to a duel. Like, we're talking old school, pistols at high noon, duel. It resulted in both Dons being killed, but Don Santiago had no male heirs to take over for him, so the elder of the Santiago daughters, Maria, became La Doñina, and has taken over the family business. She works closely with Antonio, but keeps him at a distance. There were not many hurt feelings after the parents killed each other, but Isabella was banished because her family thought she had disgraced them, and shortly after that, Alejandro Parcelli was left as an infant on the doorstep of the new Don Antonio. His birth certificate only lists his father, but if I had to wager a guess, based on his name being the Spanish Alejandro, his complexion, and the timing, I'd say that he's the love child of Isabella and Antonio. Alejandro was born the same year as us, and he went to one of those private schools with you. I'm guessing something happened there, but I can't see anything in the incident reports concerning you. Can you think of anything?
Nope, not a damn thing. I don't remember seeing anyone like him.
Jordan, dear, there is something else you should know. Much like your family and your ancestry, these gangsters come from very ancient lines. Some ancient lines cross paths with magic. The Santiagos are direct descendants of someone known as the Temptress. The Parcellis are descended from someone who went by the name Silvertongue. Nothing is said about whether they were specifically witches, but most powers are passed down via lineage. Alejandro would have his own set of powers. This is all the more reason to be careful.
Roger that, Scarlet. I'll keep my guard up and a shield at the ready.
I landed just outside the warehouse.
I've arrived. I'm going in.
Thank you for listening to RedWing, the audio drama podcast. RedWing is written, directed, and produced by J.V. Hampton Van Sant. That's me. The cast of RedWing includes J.V. Hampton Van Sant, Amanda Jacobson, Chris Green, Dane Shiner, Simon Weeks, Christine Osimo, Skylar Paring, John Buckley, Brittany Nicholson, Lucy Fitzgerald, Kenyon Lang, Katie Hearn Church, Nathan Foster, Atticus Jackson, Rhett Hall, and Kiara Jeter as Birdkeeper. RedWing's official musician extraordinaire is Nico from We Talk of Dreams. Additional music from Kevin MacLeod. The RedWing logo is designed by J.V. Hampton Van Sant, and official character art is from the fantastic Click Art Studios. We would like to thank the following shows for being inspirations and or being involved in the podcast itself. Wine and Crime, Crime and Color, Queen's Podcast, Brain Trust Brothers Podcast, Gravity Beard, The No Sleep Podcast, Conjuria, The Cryptid Keeper, Deliberations, Getting Off Podcast, Spirits Podcast, the entire family at Blazing Caribou Studios, and everyone in the #AudioDramaSunday family. If you would like to support the show, buy official RedWing merchandise, or if you just want to stay in touch, all of our links are in the show notes and on our website, redwingpodcast.com. Be well, stay safe, and fly high, heroes.